We've been talking about Mendel and his laws and how he was able to do experiments that found that parents with different traits pass one of two possible alleles to their offspring. Since that time, a tool has been developed to help students predict exactly what the options are for alleles being passed from parents to offspring. That tool is called the Punnett Square. Let's remember that Mendel looked at monohybrid crosses, which means in the pea plants he was studying, he only looked at one trait at a time. DIHYBRID crosses are two traits at the same time. And Mendel wanted to see if traits are inherited together or independently. A quick way to find the genotypes in upcoming generation is to use a Punnett square. Remember, the genotypes are the allele combinations. We represent alleles using either capital or lowercase letters. To do the Punnett square, first you draw a big square and you divide it into 4 blocks. An example would be if we were looking at pea plant height, we could cross a big T plant with a big T little t plant. The phenotype for both of those plants, since we know that tall is dominant to short in garden peas, the phenotype for this plant would be tall, and the phenotype for this plant would also be tall. So to set up the Punnett square, again you start with the square, divide it into 4, and then you're going to take each allele that you see here from the parents, and you're going to put the one parent's alleles on one side and the other parent's alleles on the top. So we take a big T and the other big T, and then on the side you put big T and little t. And when I say by you put them there, you actually write them there. This is what it would look like. The parents are big T, and big T, little t. And those go over top of the Punnett square that you created. Then, to figure out what genes the offspring would have, you simply take the side letters and pull them into the boxes. You write them in the boxes based on what's drawn on the side and what's drawn on the top. So you would write big T in this box, and then you'd go down from the top and you would write another big T in this box. So at least one of the offspring's allele combinations could be big T, big T. Then you move on to the next letter. Big T goes here, and from the side, big T goes here. Then you move on to the next box. Big T goes here from the top, and this time little t goes here from the side. And the last box, big T from the top and little t from the side. So remember, top down, side over. So a little practice with Punnett squares. I'm not very neat when I do this, but I'll show you again how to set this up. If the problem we're studying says a round seeded plant, which is big R, what does that tell you about round? That seeds that are round are dominant because the capital R represents a dominant trait. A round seeded plant is crossed with a wrinkled seeded plant, little r. That means since the wrinkled is 2 little r's, that must mean that wrinkled is a recessive trait. The question is, what are the phenotypes of the offspring? Meaning, what would the offspring possibly look like? In order to do that, you have to set up your Punnett square. I've made a 3x3 Punnett square, and the parent alleles are going to go in the top and in the side where the boxes are purple. So, let's see if I can show you how to do this. And again, sorry if it's messy. So, we take the big R from one parent, and we separate those alleles into the top. Then we take the little r from the other parent, and we separate those alleles onto the side. Then, using top down, side over, we bring a big R down and a little r from the side, and then we do the same thing in this box, Bring the big R from the top, and remember using this one, but the same R from the side. Goes here. So far, both of the offspring that we've determined would have the same genotype. Top down, side over, we get big R, little r, and in this last box you can see that we would get big R, little r again. So, what are the phenotypes? What would big R, little r look like? If round is the dominant trait, then all of these would be round. So the the ratio of the phenotypes would be all offspring phenotypes would be round. And if we were asked for the ratio, it would be 4 to 4. If you were asked what would the offspring genotypes look like, you would say 4 out of 4 offspring would be heterozygous round. Remember, heterozygous means a combination of one dominant and one recessive allele. Homozygous can either be 2 dominant alleles like this parent or 2 recessive alleles like this parent. Let's do another. This time it's your turn. If purple flowers are dominant to white flowers, 2 heterozygous purple flowered pea plants are crossed. What are the phenotypes of their offspring and in what proportion? Use F for flower as the allele letter. So to get you started, let's take a look. If we're using F, you have to figure out what the parents look like first. They're both purple and they are heterozygous. Heterozygous means they are going to have one capital letter and one lowercase letter. Both of them appear heterozygous. Then go ahead and fill in the offspring boxes. This box, top down, side over, would be big F, big F. The next box, top down, side over, would be big F, little f. Third box, top down, side over, big F, little f. And the last box would show a genotype of little f, little f. So, what are the phenotypes of their offspring and in what proportion or what ratio? Well, if this is big F, and purple is the dominant trait, then this box would be showing a purple flower. This would also be purple, and this would be purple. Little f is the only white flowered plant. So the ratio would equal 3 out of 4 would be purple, and 1 out of 4 would be white. The ratio of the genotypes, however, is a little bit different. We see 1 out of 4 is homozygous dominant. That would be this one here. 2 out of 4 are heterozygous, these two, and 1 out of 4 is homozygous recessive. Now it really is your turn. A plant with green seeds, little y, is crossed with a heterozygous plant, big Y, little y. The heterozygous is yellow. List the following. So on your assignment, create a 3x3 table to show a Punnett square. Leave the upper left-hand corner blank. Put the parent alleles in the top and along the side, and then fill in what the offspring alleles would look like. Then also list the ratio of the phenotypes and the ratio of the genotypes. If at this point you want to pause and do that on paper or do that in your Word document, go ahead and do that. Some more practice problems. In dragons, wings are a dominant trait, capital W, but some dragons are born wingless, little w. So 2 problems for you to solve. What are the chances, either ratio or percentage, that 2 heterozygous dragons have a baby that is wingless? Just to review, if the heterozygous means 1 big and 1 little letter, so if we're using the letter W, the parents would both be big W, little w. You need to create a Punnett square, and you don't need to show me the Punnett square for these problems. I simply want you to tell me what is the ratio that two heterozygous dragons would have a wingless baby. Wingless, remember, is the recessive trait. Then problem number 2, if a wingless dragon is crossed with one that is heterozygous, how many of its offspring will also be wingless? In this case, you have two different parent genotypes. One of them is heterozygous, while the other is wingless. These are your lowercase letters. And again, do your Punnett square on paper, and in your assignment, simply tell me the ratio of offspring that will be wingless to those that aren't. Sorry about that. Let's go back into the presentation. So why does the Punnett square work? Well, it all goes back to meiosis. Each side of the Punnett square, the top or the side, represents either the sperm or the egg. The boxes simply give you the statistical chance that a certain sperm will fertilize a certain egg. Remember that the sperm is only going to have one of the alleles. Capital, lowercase, one of the two, not both. Consider a pea plant that is both round and tall. Big R little r for round and big T little t for tall. When this plant's cells go through meiosis, the alleles segregate. Each sperm receives a random combination. The possible combinations could include big R big T, big R little t, little r big T, or little r little t. This is called a dihybrid cross because we're looking at both the traits of round and tall at the same time. Mendel's third law is the law of independent assortment, and it's illustrated by the dihybrid cross. The second law describes the outcome of dihybrid, or two-character crosses, or hybrid crosses involving more than one trait. A dihybrid is an individual that is a double heterozygote, meaning it has the two heterozygous genotypes for two different traits. For example, one for round seeds and one for yellow seeds. What are the gametes? What are the sex cells, sperm or egg, that can be produced by this individual? Refer back to the slide I just mentioned. In Mendel's experiments, he took two true breeding plants for two different traits, round and wrinkled seeds and yellow and green seeds, and then he looked at the first generation. What would the offspring phenotypes be if he crossed a true breeding round with a true breeding wrinkled, round being the dominant trait? So, what this is saying is, sometimes it's easier to show you, if Mendel took a true breeding round, so if round's the dominant trait and it's true breeding, that means the genotype has to be two capital R's, and he crossed it with a true breeding wrinkled, which would be little r. If wrinkled is the dominant trait, all the offspring would have to be round. They would all end up with a genotype of big R little r. What do you think happened when he crossed true breeding round yellow seeds with true breeding wrinkled green seeds? Well, think about all the possible combinations that you could get between R's and Y's. Seems fairly simple. That means all the first filial generation would be round, big R little r, and yellow, big Y little y, because that's the only combination of gametes or alleles. In the second generation, it gets a little more complicated. Mendel took the F1 plants, so true breeding round and true breeding yellow, and bred them together. The phenotype would have been round yellow crossed with round yellow. The second generation, he found that in the ratio of 9 round yellow plants were grown, 3 round green plants, 3 wrinkled yellow plants, and 1 wrinkled green plant. Mendel then came up with his second law, which is the law of independent assortment. Genes for different traits are inherited independently from each other. This is why Mendel found all the different combinations of traits. Dihybrid crosses work a little differently. For example, if we're using the alleles of big H, big G, little g crossed with another parent of the same genotype, you have to first find out all the possible allele combinations. You have to combine one G with one H. Huge, in this case we're using made-up terms, huge is dominant to small, and green is dominant to blue. So that means a capital H represents huge, while a lowercase h represents small, and a big G represents green, while a little g represents blue. Remember the FOIL method, first, outside, inside, last. So you take big H, and you look at the other parent, big H. That's the first letter. Sorry, big H, big G. Then you look at the outside, big H, little g. Then you look at the inside, little h, big G, and generally speaking, the capital letter would come first, but if you're mixing two different letters because you're talking about two different traits, then it's okay to leave them like this. And then you look at the last, little h, little g. These four combinations would be true for both this parent and this parent. So you need a Punnett square that has 4 boxes along each side. So you end up with 4 boxes across the top and 4 boxes along the bottom. And this is where you put your allele combinations. Then, as you combine them in the offspring, you put the H's back together and you put the G's back together from the top and the side. So this first offspring would be big H, big G, big G. Remembering that huge is dominant and green is dominant, the phenotype of this offspring would be huge green. In the next one, big H, big G, little g, and so on and so forth. I know I went through that quickly, and if you wanted to go back and do it yourself, go right ahead. So we said this one would be huge and green. The next one would be huge and green. Actually, let's go through and take a look at all of the huge green individuals. This one would be huge and green. 2, 3, 4. This one would be 5. This one would not be, because those 2 little g's there would make it blue. So we have 6. That would be huge blue. This would be huge and green. 7, 8, not that one, not that one, 9, not that one, not that one, not that one. So we have 9 that would show both dominant traits. If we took a look at another trait, we would find 3. I'll mark that in a different color. Let's use green. We would find 3 of the next kind. This one is huge and blue, and huge and blue. So we have 9, 3, now let's look for small and green. This would be small and green, and that would be small and green. 3 small and green. And last but not least, this last guy would be both small and blue. 9 to 3 to 3 to 1. So what's the probability of you actually following these results? Will real life follow the results from a Punnett square? No. A Punnett square only shows what will probably occur. And the bigger your population of offspring, the more likely it is for it to occur. It's a lot like flipping a coin. You can estimate your chances of getting heads, but reality doesn't always follow probability. If you only have 4 children or 4 offspring, then the likelihood of following the ratios that are found in a Punnett square are a lot less. If you were to happen to have 100 offspring, then the likelihood increases. As always, if you have any questions for this week, please let me know. Continue to keep up with your work, and have a good one.